This week is Yom HaShoah. It is Holocaust Remembrance Day, and the date is set by the anniversary of the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising. It's appropriate that Passover and Yom HaShoah are days apart. The message I'm taking this year is, what are we going to do with our freedoms? Meaning, we have just celebrated moving from slavery to freedom, and if all we do is others, then what have we really learned by gaining freedom? And we say more at a time of rising anti-Semitism, it is especially important that we focus on the remembrance and lessons from the Shoah for our time. Today I want to spend some time highlighting some of the more universal messages that we need to learn from the calculated, methodical efforts to destroy the Jewish people and anyone who did not comport to the Nazis' vision of a perfect person. In a post by the Holocaust Museum of Houston, they wrote, "The lessons of the Holocaust can be applied universally. This is not just a conversation about the history of the Jewish people or the history of the Roma people in Germany during World War II or other specific groups. This is not even necessarily a story about World War II. They say the Holocaust is a deeply personal story about the effect that hatred and prejudice can have on a community. It is a story about millions of people who refuse to use their voice to help others, and because of that refusal, millions of people lost their lives for no other reason than the belief that they were an inferior people." Are there any other historical events which we see hatred and prejudice impact communities? Are there current events in the world, they ask, are there current events in the world that share the experience of an apathetic population of people determined to not get involved, determined to remain neutral? Elie Wiesel once said, "We must take sides. Neutrality helps the oppressor, never the victim." One of the key experiences shared by victims of the Holocaust, as well as other genocides and acts of hatred, is the perpetrator's ability to dehumanize them. Dehumanization is the removal of human dignity, of human rights, humanity in its entirety. Dehumanization is key to getting ordinary people to commit acts of violence and mass murder against their own community members. This lesson is not exclusive to the Holocaust. Dehumanization, facilitated by the Nuremberg and Berlin laws in the Holocaust, are just acts of legalized discrimination. In Rwanda, the Hutus called the Tutsis cockroaches and used the media to spread hate speech, inspiring violent acts by the community. In Cambodia, people had their autonomy removed by the Khmer Rouge and were placed into a completely new society based on their designated trustworthiness. People being assigned uniforms, numbers, having their heads shaved, and not being allowed to speak their native languages, practice their cultural traditions, or honor their religious beliefs all play into dehumanization. And we see dehumanization everywhere. The Holocaust matters to us because it is one of the most, if not the most extensively documented instances of atrocity, hatred, dehumanization, and apathy in world history. The Holocaust also matters because it was happening. As it was happening, the world stood by and watched. Not just Germans, not just Europeans, but the world. There has been much research into the human ability to dehumanize others. Brian Resnick wrote an article titled "The Dark Psychology of Dehumanization Explained." And he writes, Noor Katili is a psychologist at Northwestern University whose research is about understanding one of the darkest, most ancient, and most disturbing mental programs encoded into our minds: dehumanization, the ability to see fellow men and women as less than human. We have this incredible capacity for cooperation, he says, It's what makes us human in many ways. And yet we have this capacity for othering. And that conclusion is opening a Pandora's box of revelations about the new wave of intolerance. Dehumanization doesn't only occur in wartime, says Nick Haslam, a psychologist who is the world's current leading expert on the topic. It's happening right here, right now, he says. And everyday good people who don't see themselves as being prejudiced, bigots, are nevertheless falling prey to it. Look back at some of the most tragic episodes in human history, and you will find words and images that stripped people of their basic human traits. In the Nazi era, the film The Eternal Jew depicts Jews as rats. During the Rwanda genocide, Hutu officials called the Tutsis cockroaches, as I mentioned, that needed to be cleared out. In the wake of World War II, psychologists wanted to understand how the genocide had happened, and we got the Stanley Milgram's infamous electroshock experiment, which showed how quickly people caved to authority. There was many others. There was the Philip Zimbardo prison experiment, which showed exactly how easily people in positions of power can abuse others. At Stanford, Albert Bandura showed that when participants overhear an experimenter call another subject an animal, they're more likely to give that subject a painful shock. And if you think of murder and torture as universally taboo, then dehumanization of the other is a psychological loophole that can justify those actions. From these experiments and those that followed, it became clear that it's extremely easy to turn down someone's ability to see someone else in their full humanity, says Adam White, a psychologist at Northwestern University who studied how people think about minds and collaborates with the other researcher, with Kitili. Even children as young as 5, they say, as young as 5 years old, see the world in terms of us versus them. And we know these researchers are correct. We just know it in our gut. We are victims of othering. We also do it far too easily. In the political sphere, how immigrants are portrayed, poor people are victimized, ideological opponents are demeaned, their character is attacked, all towards dehumanizing the other political opponent. So what's the antidote to this? It may sound simplistic, especially because these institutions I'm going to mention have been manipulated and perverted so often over time. But I believe that the core and fundamental principles of religion is actually what is needed. To be clear, not fundamentalist religion, but the foundational principles of faith. In Genesis chapter 1, right at the beginning of the Torah, we read about B'Tselem Elohim, to see each other as fundamentally equal and sacred, as being created in the image of God. If that was the starting point of a conversation, that the person that you disagree with is still fundamentally good and also created in the image of God, the entire rest of the conversation would be different. How we disagree with each other would be different. What if we made the words of the Haggadah true? Halach ma'anya, this is the bread of poverty that our ancestors ate in the land of Egypt. Anyone who is famished should come and eat. Anyone who needs should come and partake in the Pesach sacrifice. We just said these words last week at the Passover Seder. And what if we actually meant it? What if we actually enacted it? That we need to build a community where this is not unusual, where we don't have to be told to go bring in the stranger, to feed the hungry, to help each other, to care for each other. Where caring for each other doesn't need to be commanded because it's already occurring. Where we can see through the economic strata and continue to realize each other as full people. So as we sat at our Seder tables last week, we were told to see beyond ourselves and to reach out to others. I think to stop dehumanizing and othering people, we also need a more sophisticated sense of theology. The Torah and how liturgy is designed suggests cause and effect, sin and punishment, good and bad, in a binary way. If you follow the laws, good things will happen. If you don't, bad things will occur. And the results, therefore, is if a bad thing has occurred, you must have done something to deserve it, because you've been bad in some way, when we have that simplistic theology. It is a closed system, a thought based on judgment and compliance. But I want to suggest a different model of theology, which is based on a different aspect of Torah practice, the rules of purity and impurity, which were talked about in this parsha today as well. There are plenty of laws around tahara and tameh, purity and impurity, but foundational to them are that they are natural states which people flow naturally in and out of. At moments of life, moments of the month, moments of the day, one may become impure by circumstances, natural functions, and more. Rather than judgment about the person's character, an approach can be to care for them in returning to purity. Now, Christian theology tainted purity and impurity with judgment and sin, but that is not how the Torah talks about it. But the Hebrew Bible sees it differently. These are natural states which we flow in and out of over time. Whether this alternative approach works for you or not, my main point here is that we need to think deeper about how our theology, how it shapes how we see each other. This week, many events are taking place to commemorate Yom HaShoah. And I hope that you'll join in some way. This Monday night, I am speaking at the Flora Singer Elementary School. A new group, the Montgomery County Jewish Educators Alliance, which is affiliated with MCPS, is having a commemoration. Dr. McKnight, the superintendent of MCPS, and the county council members and others will be present. But there's something special, not just of the location, but Flora Singer, the namesake of one of the newest MCPS elementary schools over in Silver Spring, was an MCPS teacher, a Holocaust survivor. It may be one of the first schools across the nation that has been named for a Holocaust survivor. Singer dedicated her life to sharing her Holocaust story with students and the world, focusing on messages about human kindness and tolerance. She was born in Belgium, but once World War II began, her family was forced into hiding to escape the concentration camps. And it's an incredible story. After the war, her family immigrated to the U.S., and Singer eventually married and had 2 children. She went to college, earning a master's degree in French language and literature at the University of Maryland, and began a 14-year career at MCPS. And she traveled the country talking about her Holocaust experience, and sometimes on behalf of the U.S. Holocaust Museum. And at the urging of 2 elementary school students who heard her speak, she wrote her memoir, Flora, I Was But a Child, and Singer died in 2009. But more than that, Flora Singer was a Bethel member. Flora and her husband Jack were Bethel members. Their son Mark lives in Baltimore, but their daughter Sandy and her husband David continue to be Bethel members, and their grown daughters, Jack and Flora's granddaughters, Melanie and Kara, too. So the school name has a direct connection to who we are as a community. And so it's an honor to be there Monday night. This Tuesday night, Rabbi Megdal will lead a commemoration along with Bethel member Jennifer Weitzner, who has an incredible collection of artifacts from the Holocaust, which helps us connect in a different and a meaningful way. So talk with Rabbi Megdal at Kiddush to learn more, or on the website. And then finally, next Sunday, not tomorrow, but next Sunday afternoon, the JCRC Community Yom HaShoah commemoration will be held virtually. You can register on the JCRC website. It begins at 1 p.m. next Sunday, April 23rd. So it is appropriate, I think, that Passover and Yom HaShoah are days apart, because we need to learn these lessons. Let's remember and honor and act to build the community we want, and the community I believe God wants for us as well. Because what are we going to do with the freedoms that we received from Passover? We need to make sure that we build a community not just of tolerance, but of embrace for each other, rather than dividing the community. It continues to be hard work, but I believe and I know that we are up for the challenge. Shabbat Shalom.